We're testing all 10 Paragons to see how strong they really are. We'll start with the weakest, Degree 1 Paragons, and work our way up to maxed out Degree 100s, and we're playing on a special map that's perfect for this, but more on that later. Paragons are the ultimate bloon poppers in BTD6, made by combining all 3 top upgrades of a tower to make one mega monkey. Currently, there are 10 in the game. Usually getting more than a few of these in one run is tough, but because we're starting off with Degree 1s, it shouldn't be too bad. All we have to do is fill the map with boats and farms so we make extra money every round, get all the tier 5 monkeys we need, and combine them into Paragons. We started with the brand new Spike Factory Paragon on round 69. On top of the 3 monkeys, it costs $680,000, but boy is it worth it. The Mega Massive Munitions Factory fills the map with spikes that deal passive damage, lays down super mines right next to it, and has 2 abilities. The first increases its attack speed for a short time, and the second shoots small mines around the track that do tons of damage when bloons hit them. And this map makes the bloons loop around 23 times, giving him plenty of time to build a wall of spikes each round. Next, we got the Nautic Siege Core on round 74. This submarine Paragon can deal tons of damage, but we're actually going to submerge it. When underwater, he gives other Paragons 10% shorter cooldowns, which will add up once we have all of them down. Plus, we can still use his ability that after a 15-second charge up time, launches 3 missiles that do tons of damage and leave radiation on the track, further damaging the balloons. And while these are expensive, we're making over 100k a round, letting us get the Paragons up pretty quick. We followed these guys with the Goliath Doomship and Master Builder, the Monkey Ace and Engineer Paragons. The Ace is the most expensive in the game, coming in at $765,000, so it was nice to get out of the way. And it's such a big tower that I wanted to make sure we could fit it inside the Subagon's range to get that shorter cooldown. Its ability lets us carpet bomb the screen, so we want that going off as often as possible. As for the Engineer, he has 2 important things going for him. The first is that he gets extra attack speed with every passing round, so we want to get him down early and he'll be much better later on. This does reach a cap eventually, but it'll take a while for him to get there. And the second thing the Master Builder has are his sentries. We're going to be placing them constantly as they are the bulk of his damage, and they give off massive explosions when sold or replaced. After that, we made the Magus Perfectus, the Wizard Paragon. This is the most complicated one in the game as we have to manage his mana and time his abilities. Luckily, we won't need to do that until the bloons are getting far, so we'll just let him do his thing until then. In the meantime, we built the Glaive Dominus. This Boomerang Paragon is one of the cheaper ones, but provides some nice stalling with its knockback rings and has decent damage overall. And just like that, it's round 99 and we have over half the Paragons. The next one up is the Apex Plasma Master. We slotted him in the last opening on the right that's still inside the Subagon's range. If you're wondering why the map is enclosed in hedges, the Dart Paragon is why. He shoots spiked balls that bounce off obstacles and they can re-hit balloons. So when he's on a map that's fully enclosed like this one, his DPS skyrockets. Technically, he doesn't have to be in range of the Subagon since he doesn't have abilities, but we want him in the middle of the map so he attacks as often as possible. But this long repeating oval surrounded by hedges will let him hit every bloon with each attack, whether they're in first or just spawning into the map. As for the left side of the water, we put down the Ascended Shadow and Crucible of Steel and Flame. The first is the Ninja Paragon that'll do a surprising amount of damage. While he specializes in popping camos and bosses, he has a passive that'll rack up the damage in free play. He makes every bloon spawn with 25% less HP, making the bloons later on much more poppable. And the second is the Tack Shooter Paragon. He needs to be inside the range of the Subagon because he has 2 abilities. The first increases his Pierce, projectile lifespan, and produces an aura of blue flames that damage nearby bloons, and the second launches a massive meteor. And we made sure to put him in the middle of the track so his attacks will hit as many bloons as possible. But that only leaves one Paragon left. The Navarch of the Seas. One of the best Paragons in the game, known for its insane damage, great ability, and how easy it is to get high degrees. Every dollar generated by our boats down bottom increased the power of this Paragon, so we actually had to sell all our boats in the water to make a degree 1 Navarch. Otherwise, he would have been in the 70s. But we got this final Paragon on round 114. Instantly, we can see why I have a habit of building the Navarch last. On top of wanting extra degrees from making money with Buccaneers, he has passive hooks that one-shot ZOMGs and below. This is great for clearing rounds, but getting pops on monkeys that'll become a Paragon is one way to make it a higher degree. And because the Navarch pulls them in, he steals a ton of potential damage other monkeys could be doing. For this run though, it's just nice that he's beating the round so quickly. And he has an ability that fires an upgraded hook strong enough to pull in bads. This can be used twice per round, but it makes them incredibly strong for challenges like this, where we see how far into free play they can go. But after a couple rounds of letting our Paragons run, we put down some tech bots so they're constantly using their abilities. The only one we left off was the Magus Perfectus, as we'll just micro the wizard once the extra damage is needed. With auto start on, we were plowing through each round in just a matter of seconds. The Navarch would pull blimps in until it hit its limit, and the rest would be popped down to nothing by our other Paragons. This performance was so brutal that the Apex Plasma Master didn't even fire a shot until round 185, where a bad finally made it inside its range. And even then, it only fired a few times. This was the first time a Bloon had made it a quarter of the way through a single lap, putting it at just over 1% of the way through the map. I was excited to see our Paragons face tougher Bloons, and the first real challenge is round 200, where we face 2 fortified bats. This is the round that ends a ton of free play challenges, but the Navarch made it way too easy. We just used his big hook the moment each of them spawned, and we were off to the 200s. Here, we'll be facing normal and fortified bads just about every round, and the Bloons will be getting faster, stronger, and more resistant to stuns as we go. Even with that, it took until round 257 for a Bloon to complete a single lap. Here, it was a fortified bad, meaning there were 2 before it that the Navarch pulled in. But this blimp has 48.5 times the normal health and was moving 6.1 times faster than normal. And still, it was only 5% of the way through the map. And we're going until we leak. It didn't take much longer for Bloons to regularly complete a lap though. On round 281, even the normal bads were doing it, and the fortified one in the back made it 2 laps in. This went on for hours. I let this run when I went to bed, when I was at a tournament, at the gym, you name it. And our Paragons were popping Bloons the entire time, making them look bad. I mean, if we just pick a random round, 359, we can watch our towers pop anything that aren't bads right away. The Master Builder and Glaive Dominus kept them in place until they were gone, and then it was just purple whales swimming in ovals. There were about 20 of them that I could see, and a fortified bad was leading the pack. What's nice is we can always tell what one's in first because the Ascended Shadow Sticky Bomb will always attach to it. But after about 5 laps, these blimps started popping. And while it doesn't look too bad in post, we sped up this footage a ton to make it watchable. But even in the mid 300s, we weren't scared of leaking. The 400s though, those were a different story. Each round took several minutes as the Bloons would complete lap after lap before being popped, and I just let my computer run. Until round 466. Instantly, 7 bads forced their way into the map, and several smaller blimps spawned with them. As usual, we took out the little ones no problem, but more bads kept coming in. Because they overlapped, I'm not sure how many there were, but most of the track was covered in these purple whales. We whittled them down, but just didn't have enough time. There were only 4 remaining when one got through, so we bought a continue and tried again, this time microing the Magus Perfectus. All I really did was make sure the Wizagon had max mana anytime his Arcane Metamorphosis came off cooldown. This turns off his Phoenix and consumes 4,000 mana per second, but gives the wizard a powerful flame attack that deals way more damage than usual, and it ends once he runs out of mana. I wasn't sure how much of a difference this would make, but it was enough to beat the round. I assumed the Bloons were still very close to leaking, but when we broke open the final fortified bad, he had at least another lap to go before leaving. With this micro, we were able to beat the next round as well, but 468 took us out. Even with the extra damage, the bads were too much, so the wizard's abilities bought us 2 extra rounds. At this point though, the Bloons had 411.5 times health and 10.32 times speed, meaning each bad had 8.23 million health. And the fortified ones had double that. But after several minutes of them going round and round, a couple made it to the end, finishing the degree 1's run. But here are some fun stats. The Apex Plasma Master dealt 4.1 billion damage, the Magus Perfectus 2.5 billion, the Master Builder 2.9, the Nautic Siege Core 1.3, the Navarch 29.7 billion thanks to its hooks, the Spactagon dealt 5.6 billion, the Crucible of Steel and Flame 1.5, the Ascended Shadow had 10, and the Glaive Dominus dealt 2 billion damage. But now we're going to do this again with stronger Paragons, this time with degree 20s. In addition to looking cooler every 20 degrees, Paragons get a massive power spike here. So we're going to do this with degree 20s, 40s, 60s, 80s, and 100s to see how much better they get with each jump in power. Luckily for us, getting degree 20s is pretty simple. All we need are the 3 tier 5 monkeys and to add in some pops, other upgrades, or extra money. So after filling out the map with boats and farms like last time, we built the Master Builder. The 2 tier 5s up front had dealt some damage, and we placed several 023 engineers around the map. And when we combined them all, we made a degree 20 engineer Paragon. Next, we set up the Goliath Doom ship, but because monkey aces are so big, we could only fit a few of them without selling the farms. This would have only been enough for a degree 12 as is, so we invested an extra $190,000 into it to hit the degree 20 mark. Normally, you can't see what degree the Paragon will be until after you make it, but I have the Useful Utilities mod by Doom Bubbles that makes challenges like this much easier to set up. Over the next handful of rounds, we'd make a Paragon whenever we had the money, placing them in the same spots we had the degree 1s. Nothing eventful happened as we just popped every bloon off screen, but through a ton of farming and grinding pops, we built our 10th degree 20 Paragon on round 123. Just like last time, we saved the Navarch of the Seas for last, and we had to sell all but 2 of our flavored trades to not make it too strong. Then we set up the tech bots and let it run for a few days. At first, it looked very similar to the degree 1's run. Nothing was making it far, and even the bads were getting popped quickly. I mean, the Apex Plasma Master didn't even shoot until round 202, and it wasn't until round 261 that a bloon finished a single lap, 4 rounds after the degree 1's. Now, I wasn't sure if this meant the degree 20s would last exactly 4 rounds longer, or if this would compound because it's such a long map. We just had to wait and see. 4 hours later, we hit round 359 where we can compare the two, and as expected, the degree 20s were significantly faster. Here, the bads are being popped about 5 laps in, whereas the degree 1s were popping them in about 8 laps. I wasn't getting my hopes up though. In all of my free play runs, we're completely fine until the bloons start making it super far out of nowhere. With the degree 1s, it was the 400s when things started to spiral out of control. To my surprise though, these guys handled them just fine. The 430s that caused us trouble last time still took a while to beat, but they weren't even getting halfway through the map. And before I knew it, we were on round 468. The round that took us out last time even with Magus Perfectus Micro. It took 8.5 minutes, but our monkeys pulled through. But this is when it started to spiral. The rounds took so long and the bloons were so tanky that it was impossible to tell how far they were getting. It was just a nerve-wracking event knowing that eventually something would leak and we didn't know when. But our Paragons just kept going. I knew there was a big power spike every 20 degrees, but this was wild. Our last run died in the 460s, and this one is pushing into the 500s. And while the rounds are randomized at this point in the game, we are guaranteed to face fortified bads every round, which are really the only bloons we're scared of. But to make things worse, the 500s jump up the scaling to boost Moab class bloons health by 500% and their speed 2% every round. So on round 502, the blimps have 501 times health and 11 times speed. And with this scaling came round 507. The one that finally got through. For the longest time, the map was filled with fortified whales. Slowly, we covered them in bandages, but they were just too much for our Paragons. When one finally leaked, there were still several left on the map, so it wasn't that close. That being said, it's time to buy a continue and micro the wizard. Now, I know this adds a ton of damage to our Magus, but I'm still shocked at the results. The extra damage was able to break open all the remaining bads on round 507, and we stunned the insides until they popped. But what's more impressive was we beat more than just this round. We beat all the way through 510 without showing signs of stopping. But there was one last free play adjustment we had to face. Round 511. The hardest bloon group we could face starts spawning here. Stacks of 5 bads and 5 fortified bads with 0 spacing, guaranteed to spawn throughout the round to make it much harder. And boy, did we notice the jump in difficulty. They blew right through us, reaching the end with at least 15 bads still standing. But these Paragons lasted 43 more rounds than the degree 1s, and we have much stronger ones coming later in the video. But these bloons were nothing to laugh at. Fortified bads had over 21 million health, and is why our Paragons racked up so many more pops. On average, the degree 20s did 2.23 times more damage than the degree 1s, with the top two being the Navarch of the Seas and Ascended Shadow at 53.4 and 21 billion damage. Time to double the degrees and try out the 40s. But if you're enjoying the video, please use creator code Hbomb if you buy anything in-game. It helps us out a lot. This is where it starts to get difficult, as each Paragon will take quite a bit more money or pops to get the right amount of power. That being said, the ease of this map should allow us to do so. We'll just have to take farming a bit more seriously. On top of the usual boats and farms, we made a large Monkeyopolis, a tech-botted Monkeynomics, and we ultra boosted a Banana Central, all of which will make us more money per round. I thought this would give us a late start as we spent more time setting up the farms, but we actually made our first Paragon on the same round as usual, round 69. I don't know why it's been lining up this way, as I didn't even know it happened until we were making the video, but if nothing else, we're consistent. Anyway, we got as many pops on the XXXL trap as we could, filled the map with 024 engineers, and still had to invest an extra $529,000 to make the master builder a degree 40. But this shows my favorite part about Paragons, how they look cooler the higher degree they are. Compared to a degree 1, our master builder has a cool new chest piece and an orange visor instead of a blue one, and the changes get more drastic later on. But building him made me think. How much money we have to spend in the slider for higher degrees depends on the price of the Paragon itself. So a cheap one, like the Tacagon, gets way more power per dollar than an expensive one like the Spactagon, but all pops are created equal. So my thought was to make the cheaper ones right now with our money and wait on the more expensive ones like the Goliath Doomship to let them rack up the pops. So after getting the Master Builder and letting him ramp up his attack speed with each round, we put down a Flying Fortress and Wizard Lord Phoenix to start damaging the balloons while we work on other Paragons. The first of which was the Apex Plasma Master. We already had some pops on him because of the tier 5s up front, but he's especially easy to get extra degrees on because we're allowed 2 Crossbow Masters, his tier 5 upgrade of the bottom path. This is the only tier 5 in the game that we can get 2 of, as there's a monkey knowledge point that lets us do so, and extra tier 5 upgrades contribute a ton of power to Paragons. So on round 74, we made our degree 40 Dartagon. Shortly after this, we prepped each Paragon by placing a tier 5 in their spots. This lets some get pops, like the Carpet of Spikes and Infernal Ring, and made sure all of them would be inside the range of the Subagon later on. But with how much money we were making per round, we were able to get a degree 40 Paragon about every 5 rounds. I expected some to take much longer to save up for than others, but our pop farming seemed to work, especially since we were able to turn off the Phoenix of the Magus Perfectus so no Paragon was stealing pops. Instead, they were all going to our Carpet of Spikes or Flying Fortress. This let us get our last Paragon on round 117, 6 rounds earlier than our degree 20s. We set up the tech bots and let them run free. And for almost 100 rounds, the Apex Plasma Master did nothing, just rotated in circles waiting for the Bloons to get to him. He waited 35 minutes for round 207, where a bad finally made it far enough for the Dartagon to get some shots off. It wasn't much, but from here on out, the Bloons would routinely make it far enough to enter his range. But you may notice that we're trying something new here. We also tech-botted the Magus Perfectus. I realized that if we used his abilities when they came off cooldown, his mana was typically pretty full, and this way we get to use his Phoenix Explosion and Arcane Metamorphosis abilities throughout the run. So you'll be seeing purple ZOMGs and BFBs floating backwards along the track. This adds quite a bit of damage at all stages and will help us speed through the easier rounds. Before I knew it, we were on round 372 and our Paragons were firing on all cylinders. The normal bads were getting popped 1 or 2 rounds in, and their insides were frozen in place until extra attacks popped them down to nothing. And for the fortified bads, it depended on if they were being focused or not. The one in front lasted under 2 laps, while the one in the back broke open right after completing its 4th lap. The crazy thing is, this round lasted 3.5 minutes, and the Bloons are only making it 17% of the way to the exit. It's clear that these guys are killing it, so let's jump to the rounds that finished off our previous runs. Starting with 468. Already a super high round, and our degree 40s handled it no problem. Our Navark even made the mistake of using its upgraded hook to pull in a Moab instead of a bad at the start of the round, as none of the purple whales had spawned yet, but they still had more than enough damage to pop everything in time. Several fortified bads spawned this round, so it didn't make much of a difference. Only the Navark missed out on a ton of damage. Either way, our Paragons popped around with the fortified bads only getting about halfway through the map. Next, we have round 511, the round that ended our degree 20s and where stacks of 5 fortified and normal bads spawn with 0 spacing. Right off the rip, several bads poured onto the screen, and I could only assume several of them were stacked. We watched the ones in front get broken down to ZOMGs and still have bads underneath, so I couldn't count how many there were. But as the round went on, more and more bads came onto the screen. Even with several stacks out here, most of the track was covered in whales, and we could only tell what Bloon was in first because of the sticky bomb. But this is right around the time that it started to go downhill. In real time, we had no idea how far the Bloons were getting, especially since each round was taking over 10 minutes apiece. But after looking at the footage, we can say the Bloons made it about 2/3 of the way through the map before we popped them all. This gives us plenty of track to work with, but as usual, we won't have any way of knowing when a leak will happen. A Bloon will just exit eventually. The next 30 rounds, the Bloons got farther and farther, and our Paragons were racking up the damage. But then, round 545 came. The track was full of bads, and it was impossible to tell how far they were. Round and round they went, slowly being covered in bandages. These impossibly tanky blimps made their way through the track. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, they started to break down to ZOMGs. And as we know, we can permastall these. Before we knew it, there are only 4 bads left, all on their last stage before breaking open. But as they got to the bottom of the track, they turned to the exit instead of left for another lap, ending our run. We bought a continue and tried again. I had some hope for this one as our Navark pulled in a DDT at the start of the round when he was tech botted, but this time I'll be microing his hook and the Magus' abilities. This way, we'll have one less fortified bad to deal with. But the game was so laggy that it was very difficult to use the Magus. Even finding him was hard since the map was covered in bads, and it took several seconds for BTD6 to recognize my clicks, let alone maximizing his mana for Arcane Metamorphosis. So after a while, I put the tech bot back on him as it definitely does a better job than I can. But even with our Navark using better hooks, a bad made it to the exit. So the degree 40 score is around 545. Our Paragons had some obnoxious damage counts though. The APM dealt 19 billion damage, the Magus 18.8, Master Builder 10.5, the Subagon did 5, the Navark dealt 79.3 billion, the Spactagon did 18.3, Tachagon 8.5, the Ascended Shadow did 37.2, and the Glaive Dominus did 8.6 billion damage. Now, I don't know why I kept missing the Goliath Doomship, but based on mid-run numbers, he seemed to always deal about 50% more damage than the Magus Perfectus. So we can guess that he did about 28 billion damage. The degree 1s lasted 468 rounds, the degree 20s 511, and the degree 40s 545, making each jump in degrees last an average of 38.5 extra rounds. But now, it's time to try out the degree 60s, which are about how strong you'd want your Paragons to be for an elite boss fight. That being said, the fortified bads we just lost to have almost as much health as Elite Vortex, so I'm looking forward to this one. The only thing is getting degree 60s will be much more expensive and time consuming than the previous runs. You see, there are 5 ways of getting more power on your Paragons. We've covered most of them, like sacrificing extra tier 5 towers, getting more pops or generating money, spending extra money in the slider or on sacrificed monkeys, and merging non-tier 5 upgrades. The problem is, each one of these categories has a limit of how much power they can contribute to the Paragon getting made, so we can't just fill the map with cheap, low-tier upgrades for easy power. The 5th option, though, is unlimited. Paragon Totems. At level 20, Geraldo adds Paragon Totems to his shop, and each one placed adds 2,000 power to the next Paragon made. And there is no limit to how many we can sacrifice. The problem is, only one comes back in stock every round, and they're very expensive, coming in at $22,100. But that is still a great dollar to power ratio for more expensive Paragons, and it'll be good practice for getting the degree 80s and 100s. Anyway, we started off like normal, filling the map with farms, boats, and placing the 3 tier 5 engineers. But right after this, we spent $110,000 to level Geraldo up from 12 to 20, and we started buying his Paragon Totems anytime they were in stock. This allowed us to build a degree 60 Master Builder on round 72, and man is he starting to look cool. Massive black gears are added to his shoulders, his front right hand is bright blue, and his claw turned from yellow to a deep orange. Next up, we built the Apex Plasma Master. Admittedly, we should have made this one without totems because of how cheap he is, but I was very inefficient with this one. We just got his extra Crossbow Master and invested 280k, getting him on around 79. For the Dartagon, the only real change in looks is adding some spikes to the front of his crossbow. But now, it's time to add a bit of strategy to how we make the rest of our Paragons. We started farming pops on the Ace, Wizard, and Spactory while we worked on a cheap one in the Crucible of Steel and Flame. It was pretty easy to do as we filled the map with overdrives to max out the upgrade sacrifices and then put $320,000 into the slider, getting it on around 87. Because of how crowded the runs have been, the only difference I could see between this guy and his degree 40 variant were the spikes up top turned from white to black, but I'm sure the base's appearance changed too. Moving on, we did something completely out of character. We built the Navarch of the Seas. The boats had generated enough money to not need any Paragon totems or cash invested to make it a degree 60, so I figured this was the time. Plus, we can place down the flavored trades again and make even more money per round as the Navarch buff stacks with the Trade Empire. As for looks, there's more red and green in his design than the last run, but the center is getting too busy to see all the changes, so we're going to fast forward to getting the final Paragon. Round 143, we sold all the boats and farms, placed a ton of vases up top, and put $750,000 into the slider to make a degree 60 Goliath Doom ship. Luckily, this guy flies above the rest, so we can see that he gets 2 jet engines added to his design, many more yellow lights / windows, and the graffiti on his tail changed from a damaged balloon on each side to one right in the middle. And as we could have guessed, this stomped the next few hundred rounds. Now, so far we've checked out each Paragon set at a time, but it's getting kind of repetitive. Like, this one beats round X, the next beats round Y over and over. So let's try something new. For these stronger degrees, I'll show it and 3 other runs on the rounds others have lost to, sped up with chill music. Just watch how much faster the higher degrees clear the rounds. I knew the stronger Paragons popped the rounds much faster than weaker ones, but it seemed like the higher degree Paragons I got, the slower my computer would run. So the rounds actually took longer for me in person. And now it's cool to watch them absolutely dust the weaker ones when we speed up the games to all be at the same pace. As for round 545, only the degree 40s had made it this far, so we'll compare them straight up. The degree 40s were very close to winning as I retried twice and only a single bad leaked. Because this was so close, I expected the degree 60s to crush it, but it took them 16.5 minutes to pop the round. And when the run was going on, I had no idea how far the balloons had gotten. In post, I counted the furthest balloon getting 21 laps in, putting it at about 90% of the way through the map, meaning it wasn't an easy victory. Just 2.5 more laps and the monkeys will lose. You'd think this would only take a little bit, but this group made it 32 more rounds before losing. Here, bads quickly filled the entire track, and we knew some of them were stacks of 5. Even with that, we whittled them down, and it was always fun to see the monkeys break a full stack down to just ZOMGs, letting us start to see the track again. But after several minutes, the bads started to get through. There were at least 17 fortified ones left, so it would have been a miracle for the monkeys to beat this round. So round 577 did them in, even with a retry. But the purple whales were at a staggering 876.5 times health and 12.5 times speed, making each fortified bad have 35 million health, really letting our Paragons rack up the damage. The Ascended Shadow dealt 56.7 billion, the Tachagon did 14.9, Spactagon 26.6, Navarch 111.8, Nautic Siege Core 7.6, Goliath Doomship 39.8, Durtagon 30.4, Magus Perfectus 28.1, Master Builder 16.2, and the Glaive Dominus did 13.3 billion damage. Time to take this up a notch again. Degree 80 Paragons. We got off to a hot start, making our Navarch of the Seas on round 56. This is the easiest one to get to degree 80 because of how much money we can make with early boats. And I wanted to see if the extra money we generate from the Double Trade Empire would be worth doing for the degree 100s. But the best part was seeing the Navarch in all its glory. The captain now wears a white cap and a crown, the ship itself got more red, and the runway went from white to gray. From here, we did the usual. Play some tier 5s to farm pops, buy a Paragon totem every round, and work towards getting a master builder. This took us 25 totems and $1.4 million in the slider to build, but it looks cooler too. His visor turned green, he got some orange accents on his helmet, and his claw is now bright blue. But it's clear that this is going to take a while. Over the next 100 or so rounds, we made sure to place a totem every time one was in stock, and we built a degree 80 whenever possible, getting our 10th one, the Goliath Doomship, on round 214. And we had almost $11 million left over. There are only two things slowing us down for getting these Paragons: pops and totems. Money was not an issue, so we learned that getting an early Navark is not the play. Something we already assumed, but it was good to test. Here, we got a great view of all the Paragons. At degree 80, there are large changes in appearances. The Magus is now deep purple with a halo of stars around its hat, while its Phoenix gained an extra set of wings. The Subagon became a darker blue. The Apex Plasma Master got 4 nodes on top of its head. The Glaive Dominus now has green crystals on its hood, and the Goliath Doomship's front cannons got larger, and it added one large orange bulb on each wing. But we will jump straight to round 468, as there wasn't a single challenging round up to this point. What was surprising though was that our degree 80 Paragons were popping the rounds at the same speed as the degree 60s. They finished rounds 468 and 469 at about the same time, so I'm not sure how much farther they'll get than last run. On the positive side, they did pop the balloons about twice as fast as the degree 1s. While they were leaking, the degree 80s were already on round 470. Next, we'll look at round 511, where the degree 20s lost, and there were two things that jumped out to me. The first was the degree 80s outpaced the 60s this time around. I figured this would be the case, and the reason round 468 was so close was because of the random balloon sends. The degree 60s must have gotten a much easier round than the 80s. The second thing I noticed was the huge difference between the 80s and 20s. The degree 80s were popping the final couple bads when the 20s were only starting to break open the first few. Things slowed down in the late 500s though. I really like looking at how our next group of Paragons handles the round that beat the previous one, so let's watch round 577. Other than the Navark's hooks, it took about 12 laps for the degree 80s to start breaking down the fortified bads, and there were so many on screen that it took ages to get to them all. By the end, some of these purple whales had spent 15 minutes traveling 20 or 21 laps around their Paragons, taking about 45 seconds per lap. But the degree 80s pulled through, with the balloons getting about 90% of the way to the exit. With how far the balloons were already getting and how close in damage these were to the degree 60s, I wasn't sure when it would end. But the trend of lasting over 30 extra rounds continued as these Paragons made it into the 600s. This is roughly where my Paragons lost last time I made them all degree 100s a year ago, but we had fewer Paragons back then. Anyway, it was round 608 that did them in. Even with a few retries, several bads made it to the exit. How we can beat the last round and leak a ton here, I don't know, but round 608 is a great score. And the top two damage dealers were the Navark of the Seas at 156 billion damage and the Ascended Shadow at 82 billion. But now it's time for the main event, the maxed out degree 100s, and we get to use all the lessons we've learned so far. Delay getting the Navark, farm pops on as many towers as possible, and get Geraldo to level 20 ASAP so we can get those totems down early. And by early, we did this by spending over $100,000 on round 56. After 53 totems and a couple million pops, we were able to make our first degree 100 Paragon of the day, a maxed out master builder. This took quite a long time, but the further we go, the easier it'll be to get pops on our monkeys. This category doesn't cap out until 16.2 million pops or $4.05 million generated, so we can get quite a bit of power as the rounds go on. As this gets easier though, getting Paragon totems will get harder and harder as the rounds only get tougher with time. The next Paragon we made was the Apex Plasma Master. We didn't have the best way of getting pops on him as the hedges block the start of the map, so we also put down a Flying Fortress and Wizard Lord Phoenix to help pop the balloons. Really, my only goal is to pop them before they reach the Master Builder, as any pop that goes to him is wasted. That being said, as we made our way through the mid-hundreds, the balloons were making it to the Enchagon. 47 totems later, we made the Apex Plasma Master. This guy is also on the right side of the map, so he won't be stealing many pops either unless the balloons make it well into the map. Still, we're on round 154 and we only have 2 of 10 Paragons. The next one up is the Magus Perfectus, but it's much easier to get pops on as the Archmage and Phoenix can see the start of the map while the Prince of Darkness can spawn balloons to insta damage them. With this, we were able to make the Magus after just 20 rounds, and even with having to dump millions of dollars into every Paragon, our current setup was making enough money to keep up with the demand. But now, more balloons are spawning than before, so we placed a few tier 5s to start getting pops on the rest of the monkeys. We got a Grand Saboteur to damage the balloons as they enter the map, all 3 Spactories, Tack Shooters, and Boomers to damage the balloons as they pass, and we buffed them all with a Perma-Brew and Homeland Defense. This let us need very few totems for the next 6 Paragons. We only needed 23 for the Goliath Doomship, 21 for the Ascended Shadow, and the absolute minimum of 20 for the Navarch, Spactagon, Glaive Dominus, and Crucible of Steel and Flame. Once we got the 9th Paragon, it was clear we had enough money for the Nautic Siege Core, but nowhere near enough pops or totems. Because the water was full of boats all game, we weren't able to farm pops on them. So we sold our bucks and filled the water with first strikes, using their abilities whenever possible. This gave them at least 10,000 damage per ability, letting us rack up the damage pretty quickly. And it only took us 31 totems to get a maxed out Subagon. So we got our 10th and final Paragon on round 329. Already well into free play, but nowhere near the rounds we'll be hitting with these towers. We made our way to round 468, where the degree 1s lost. But here, the degree 100s put on a show. It only took 2.5 laps to start popping the normal bads, and we took out the last fortified one 5.5 laps in, only a quarter of the way through the map. The next checkpoint is round 511, where the degree 20s lost. This is the first time that bads cover the entire map, and several of them are stacks of 5. Combine this with every blimp having 33% more health than round 468, and the bads actually lived for a bit. Normal ones made it 5 laps in before popping, and the last fortified one broke open after 10.5 laps, which is surprisingly fast considering it had 21.86 million health. On to round 545, the degree 40s last round. Each fortified bad had 28.66 million HP, almost 7 million more than 511. And even with millions of extra health and a little more speed, the balloons only made it 12 laps in, about halfway through the map. Round 577, where the degree 60s lost, was pretty much the same. The fortified bads had about 7 million more health, and the last one made it 14 laps in before breaking down to DDTs and ZOMGs. 608, the round that beat the degree 80s. These Bloons have 1,031.5 times more health than normal, making the fortified bads come in at 41.26 million health, more than a tier 5 elite Bloonarius, so it's no surprise that it took several minutes to complete this round. The last bad made it 21 laps around the map, almost making it to the end. And the reason Paragons pop bosses so much faster than they are popping the Bloons here is because they get tons of extra damage to boss Bloons, so that 40 million health on Bloonarius gets dropped much faster than the bads here. Just like last time, I wasn't sure how much further the degree 100s would go as the Bloons were already making it 90% of the way through the map, but the trend continued. The 610s, 20s, and 30s all passed with me having no idea when we'd leak. But it finally came on around 644, 176 rounds after the degree 1 Paragons lost. Even with us microing the Navark of the Seas, 9 bads were still standing when one finally got through. But these Bloons had 1,211 times health and were moving 13.84 times faster than usual, meaning each fortified bad had 48.46 million health, leading to some insane damage counts. The Glaive Dominus dealt 27.2 billion damage, the Ascended Shadow 117.7, the Crucible of Steel and Flame 32.2, the Mega Massive Munitions Factory 53.7, the Nautic Siege Core 14.4, the Master Builder 32, the Apex Plasma Master 65.2, the Magus Perfectus 50.8, and the Navark of the Seas did an astounding 211.7 billion damage. But that was how far all the Paragons can get in a game of BTD6. If you want to see how far each one of them can get individually in a game of Chimps, click this video right here.